Welcome back to your spot in the rotation. We took a brief hiatus. Really, there was some travel, there were some meetings, but we are back and we are ready to talk about all of the things that are happening in the cannabis industry, moving really quickly. Patrick joins us. He's on the road in Tennessee. Uh, Glad you're with us again, Patrick. Hope you're doing well. And Brian are you home in North Carolina? Are you on the road as well?
I am home. Thanks, George. Thanks for setting up the emergency news sesh. We've been away too long.
Yeah, and I know you and Patrick had mentioned there's a couple of really meaningful things taking place. What's on your radar this week?
Sure, bunch of stuff. So yeah, welcome back, everybody. It's something that I think Patrick and I have both missed. George as well. In the 2 weeks that we've kind of taken a little break to digest what we've done and to see where we're going. A lot of stuff is happening. Not a lot of movement in the equity markets, but we're seeing a lot of movement, whether it's noise or real movement in DC. I think the biggest news for me today is my son had to go back and do a cast for his arm, and he's boycotting any love and affection for his parents because we made that. But the other big news is the DEA essentially giving a contract out to a company called Bright Green, and then that company is planning to list on the NASDAQ. And if anybody listened to our discussion with Ian Stewart from Wilson Elser on podcast number 5, we talked about the complications of a bank listing on a NASDAQ or NYSE. Now we're hearing that this company is going to directly register on the NASDAQ, and they're plant touching. So I think that's big news. There has been no U.S. MSO, plant touching or dispensary operator that's been allowed to list on the NASDAQ or NYSE, given the federal illegalities. So now we've seen a bank say they're going to list, and a DEA approved marijuana farm in New Mexico say they're going to list. Patrick, when I sit there and look at that, I don't know how, if I'm an MSO, I don't cry wolf here or cry foul and say, let us do that too. What do you think?
Well, this is a lot of .gov, right? This is George's favorite topic. My understanding of this is that Bright Green, or is it Green Bright or Bright Green?
Bright Green.
Bright Green. Bright Green is going to only be able to provide the DEA with product, right? So they are going to be funding research, medical research or cannabis research, by giving the DEA flower to then break it down and figure out what the hell is actually going on. Regardless, they're not being funded by the DEA, right? So they're asking the funding to come from the private sector by doing a public listing and raising money in that regard. And I don't know whether the contracts are going to drive revenue to Bright Green or what that's going to look like long term. But the fact of the matter is, this feels a little bit like a shadow puppet, where the government's saying, well, for you, if you help us, we'll scratch your back. Meanwhile, everybody else is, getting hammered over there, on the CSE and not having access to institutional capital. So
what type of research? Sorry to interrupt, but what type of research needs to be done at this point on the cannabis market? Hasn't there been? Are they looking for a breakthrough usage of cannabis that they're going to use to agree or disagree to have it federally legalized? Like, what type of research does the public at this point need? What is the requirement?
That's a great question, George, because I think it's a crock of shit, the whole thing. And I think, Pat, we would all agree on here. It just feels like they're letting some people front run.
Wait, 2,000 years worth of anecdotal evidence isn't enough. We've got to go forward and figure out exactly, how many brain cells it kills and what kind of fried eggs we need for a commercial. It's horseshit. I mean, It's absolutely horseshit.
Well, there's a good amount of, PhDs and chemists and doctors and educated folks from many different disciplines. I mean, couldn't they just go out and source those folks for a hearing of some sort or answer any question they needed?
Well, it's a great question. 300, I think it says 300 acres. That's a lot of weed. What's the government going to do? I mean, that is a lot of weed. It's going to be all outdoor grow, I believe. Actually, it might be greenhouses.
Greenhouses.
Yeah, it is greenhouses. So that's a great question. It's not going to be the high performing, high THC level stuff. And like you said, what do they need to do research for? The University of Mississippi has been doing research on the plant for years, right? They've had the only DEA approved license in the
Decades,
U.S. for decades, right?
Right.
Yeah, 100%. What don't they know that they need to find out? It feels like an end around, a front running play. There is anecdotal evidence out there, and we're going to get into this with Ian at some point because we want to have that discussion. Ian sent us a bunch of medical research that's been done at UCLA. It's been done for decades, right? Smoking can harm you. Well, everybody knows smoking can harm you. Well, will it harm you the same way as nicotine and tobacco in a cigarette? Nobody really can tell you the difference there yet. So they're obviously going to look at that. Then you see that the U.S. Senate passed a cannabis medical research bill, has to go to the House, but it's a bipartisan bill, so they are moving the football down the field. But it's obvious that deal is in conjunction with these DEA approved sites. So where does all the weed go when they're done doing their medical research? What happens to these companies when they're done doing their medical research? Sounds to me like we're going to have a government controlled cannabis arm. And if that's what the federal government's trying to do, yikes, is all I can say. Patrick.
So, listen, we can go off the rails here. So let's just do it. When we start talking about the effects of the COVID-19 vaccine, right, and the studies that need to take place, what is the time frame? I think Pfizer said it's going to take them like
2077 or something like that.
27, some crazy number like that to establish what the long-term effects of the vaccine are. So we're not going to know until I'm dead, which is fine because I'm going to die. But okay, so that's true medical research. That's Pfizer. That's Moderna. These are the biggest medical pharmaceutical companies in the world.
Basically extensions of the U.S. government when it comes to funding, and a lot of the individuals who are in government agencies are also on the board of Pfizer.
So what the fuck is the DEA going to accomplish in 5 years of studying cannabis if you need 50 years to study the effects of a vaccine? Right? I don't know what the end game here is, but it doesn't feel like it's good for the companies that have been out here grinding and battling and figuring out how to produce flour and how to build a business when the government is figuring out, okay, well, now we're going to fund a company to do research. We're going to pass medical research over here. That tells me that federal legalization is 5 years away.
Also, right? What about guys like Michael Diaz, who was incarcerated for probably arrested by some faction of the DEA, and now the DEA is, involved with monetizing marijuana? It's just, people talk out of both sides of their mouth. They want to give people work and social equity, but it's not seeming to be materializing.
Well, I think the interesting thing here is one interesting facet, right? Colorado, when did they pass legalization for medical use? 2007, 2008? What was the year?
Yes.
It was obviously earlier than that, or earlier around that time frame, 2007 to 2010 or something like that. Okay. I've always contended that going medical was always an avenue just to go recreational. So is this the government's stepping plan of we're gonna have an entity that we control that gets us in the medical side, and then we can take over bigger swaths of the recreational side? I'm with you, Patrick. I just don't know how an MSO takes that news.
I don't know. I don't think they take it well. And to George's point, you're looking at the MORE Act, you're looking at the Safe Banking Act, and you're looking at some of the bills that have been put forth that are really focused on creating a change in social equity and doing those types of things. And then the DEA backs a company whose board of directors looks like this phone call. Right? It's just it just smacks of nonsense. I'm looking at it right now. We've got a guy from BMW that's on the board. It's typically contradictory to everything that's being said, because at the end of the day, the hand that gets in the till is the same hand that always gets in the till. And .gov is first, and they're setting up their friends to succeed. Period.
Yeah, it does feel that way, and it's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling, like you said. It's not a good feeling for the people that have been in the trenches for the last 5 to 6 years, going to Canada to list, and just getting no help from the tax side or from the banking side. And it's and these are, and to get a little political, these are the same people that elected this, this, what is the word, administration, so that we could get cannabis reform. This doesn't feel like reform to me. This feels like more squashing down of good ideas. So
no, this is kicking the can down the road so that the right people, and I'm using air quotes there, guys, get in the proper position, because they're not there yet, right? So when cannabis kind of tanked in 2019, you saw a lot of folks, and whether institutional investment, whatever, they kind of backed away. And now we're seeing a resurgence of capital coming in. We're seeing more and more states get online. We're seeing more and more public support for cannabis reform, meaningful cannabis reform come forward. But everybody's now taking a pause, saying, okay, this is real, right? Now we understand that this is something that's not going to stop. It's not going to go away. So let's reset the numbers here so that the right people can get in the right seats on the bus and be able to take advantage of a burgeoning industry in the most effective fashion. That's what it feels like. It feels like the deck is being shuffled.
I call that out on our first podcast, I think, that it said that it's all about getting the right people at the trough.
I remember this. This sounds very reminiscent of the first episode we ever did, but both of you guys saying the same thing. Brian, what else is going on? Obviously, we could talk about that for days on end, but there's got to be some other interesting situations that you're looking at, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me is there was a pretty scathing article that came out about a deal that was announced between two large MSOs, and how the DOJ was going to, be taking a longer look at these deals that have been announced. There's been a couple of them that have been announced the last couple of weeks, the last 2 months. Patrick brought up another good point to me. It's like, why are they slow playing these deals? Why does it take so long to get these things done and get DOJ approval? If two companies without cannabis by their name were to merge in at this size, right, it would be done within 6 months. These things are going to take 9 to 12. And then, you're talking the way they format these deals, there's a lot of stock involved. So when stock valuations change, it's going to change the valuation on the deal. That's going to hinder the deal getting done as well. So the longer we take, the current market conditions will change, and then deals won't get done. Companies will go under, or deals will get done and at disadvantaged terms. It's not a really good, climate right now for that M&A. So
let's talk numbers. Let's talk real numbers, right? Mm-hmm. So in our world of insurance, and I promise, guys, I'm not going to talk about insurance, but we looked at a deal last year that was slowed up by the DOJ and regulators in Europe as well. This was the a merger between Aon and Willis. Yep. And the numbers behind that deal, let's just raw numbers behind that deal, massive. As a matter of fact, when the deal fell through, Aon had to pay Willis $1 billion in cash to break that deal. Right. So that was the penalty. That was the deal payment penalty. All right. That's $1 billion in cash. That took time. That's a big deal. In the outset, the DOJ just said this is going to hinder consumers' access to insurance, and therefore it's in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, and therefore the deal can't go through. That high level, that's kind of what happened. You're looking at the Cresco Columbia Care deal. It's only $2 billion in stock. It's only $2 billion in stock, and they're going to take a long, hard look at that deal. What other merger that is a $2 billion merger is going to take 12 months for $2 billion? It's crazy to me that they're looking at this. And at the same time, the shares aren't even traded on the New York Stock Exchange. They're not traded. They're not traded in the U.S. This is a Canadian deal. What the fuck is the DOJ getting into this and taking a look at it in antitrust? Because what? You're going to have too many licenses in the state? Well, you don't give a fuck. This is
the market's being slowed. The market's being slowed. It's being slowed on purpose. And if we want to drag it in, let's go back to Jersey. Jersey is the perfect fucking example. Jersey, you have companies saying, hey, we're going to have product we're going to have to destroy if we don't get these things open, the dispensaries open, licenses approved. And now they put another delay on it, saying that they're short on product because they're worried about the medical side not having enough product so that the recreational side can then go get theirs. medical has to come first. I get that. I get all that. But where's the disconnect? Why is the cannabis panel that they've put together putting the brakes on when the MSOs are saying, no, we're ready to go? Where's the disconnect? Why is it being slowed down? Safe, there's no more talk about the Safe Act being, or Safe Banking Bill being put through. Jerry, what's his bag? A Democrat from New York, Nadler. He's come out and said he's going to push the his cannabis, the MORE Act through. Is that the one? His is the MORE Act.
That's coming up for, I think that's coming up for a vote.
He said he was going to put it this week. He said he was forcing it through this week. That's not going to pass. It's not going to pass the Senate. Even if it gets through the House, it's not going to pass the Senate the way it is. It's just not going to happen. It's already been tried and true. So this bright green thing signals to me that they're slowing, everything's being slowed down so that somebody can get to the front of the line. And then when that person or that entity gets to the front of the line, what happens to everybody else? I got to think safe banking is going to come in right on the heels of all this. And we're not going to get full federal legalization, but like you said, I think all of this is a big smokescreen for safe banking to come through. And that's my prediction, because they need to slow it down right now, because companies like Cresco and Verano, they're going to rule the roost. Curaleaf, they're going to rule the roost. And I'm not sure that the government is going to let that happen. And and on federal legalization.
Sure they are. Oh, sure they are. Those guys are in great position, right?
Do you think so?
Cash is king. I think that they're in great position. Okay. I think they've fundraised effectively. They've deployed capital effectively. They've built out revenue streams so that they can get to a positive EBITDA number in the next 2 years. And while that's happening, then you can start having institutional money come in and help them scale. What actually hurts them, in my opinion, is the way that rules are being crafted in the individual states, right? No vertical integration in New York unless you're a micro company. Well, Curaleaf can't go in and create shareholder value for their companies by buying up a $1 million dispensary operation, right?
Yes.
They've got to scale. That's why $2 billion deals are good. $500 million deals are good for these guys. But I think the guys that have cash are in great shape right now, because the only thing that's going to happen once safe banking goes through is money's going to get cheaper, and they're going to be able to continue to scale more effectively and more profitably, driving shareholder value. And once you start seeing shareholder value come to fruition, then you can say, okay, these companies are profitable. Merck can look at them for a revenue stream. Coca-Cola can look at it for a revenue stream. And then you'll see legalization and all of them won't go away.
That's interesting. I like that. That's a good point.
Meanwhile, do you guys mind if I ask just one question? There was a woman who's the CEO of a company called Akerna, Pat. They are located in Colorado, and she wrote I don't know if it was an op-ed, but she wrote a story in Rolling Stone, who is still around, in the year 2022. And she was talking about how legal cannabis can revive Southern economies. And really, she was going on to speak very favorably about states like Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi. And I think the crux of the article was like a lot of those states are known to be brain drain states where, the talented and educated folks that have the opportunity to go and work in like maybe San Francisco, New York, or, Miami, for whatever reason, they leave the state. Now there's actual opportunity within the state that these states have a long history of agriculture, also dealing with regulated, regulated industries, right? Whether that's tobacco or farming, what have you. But the reason I bring all this up, it's an interesting article. Go and check it out if you can. We put it up on LinkedIn. But I was really surprised about what happened in Kentucky, just as an observer, Gen Pop observer. It seemed like if they got 9 out of 10 people in the state of Kentucky wanted to be legalized, why was it defeated? Kentucky, a big alcohol distillery state, and horse racing, and it seems like I've been to Kentucky. It seems like people like to have a good time and enjoy themselves. Why did that happen?
So I think a couple of things. One, you're talking about Jessica Billingsley.
Correct. Jessica Billingsley.
She has been a huge part and a huge advocate for this industry for a long time. I've followed her and watched her articles, and I never met her, but she's a fascinating woman, and I think she does a great job. Now, Kentucky, we got to get her on. Jessica, if you hear this, come on the show. Now, with that being said, I there's a couple things. Hemp farming is massive in Kentucky. So if you look at Rand Paul and what he's done for that community there, and really kind of pushed for some federal subsidies and the ability to get, for the Farm Act, and make access to government support available to hemp farmers, I think that's a big deal. And I think protecting that industry is important to the people of Kentucky and the legislatures in Kentucky. Number two, you do have a huge, the Bourbon Trail is right there in Louisville. I think you've got a significant influence coming from big alcohol in that state. And number three, I don't fucking know. That's all I got.
And I don't understand, are bourbon sales going to dip if they legalize marijuana? I mean, is there any correlation to that a state where and I'm asking this, in the states that have seen legalization, has alcohol taken a hit? It doesn't seem like alcohol is suffering in any way.
Well, we talked about it with Brian Moran from Garden Remedies, right? The amount of tax. Now it's different because the amount of taxes that these guys are paying is significantly higher, but the tax revenue from cannabis was outpacing alcohol sales tax in Massachusetts as of the end of 2021. And if that is a trend, if that continues, even if the percentages level off, more people are buying cannabis, right? It's just what's happening. And that money, wild.gov can print whatever and however much money they want. Eventually it runs out of pocketbooks. And so I think that there probably is some concern that the legalization of cannabis will impact the bourbon making, the distillery, and all this, that industry in Kentucky. I'm sure that is of concern.
They want to put a moat around themselves, so to speak.
I think that's been what's stopping everything. I think the alcohol lobby, I think, in some parts of the cannabis lobby are like, let us build the business before you go full legalization. But I think you heard Brian Moran say it. He thinks that alcohol will be a non-factor, right? I don't disagree with him. I think that the more and more people take the bugaboo off cannabis, they're going to realize that the side effects of cannabis, when you're high versus what happens when people are drunk, it's not even close, as in terms of the violence that can erupt. I mean, if you watch Nigeria not qualify for the World Cup and then they burn their stadium, like they're just down the field destroying everything, you don't think those people were drunk? I mean, I don't know. But that's what would happen here. Everybody would just assume everybody's in the stadium getting lit up, right? So I do think that those people that have those current vices are like, well, how do we capitalize going forward? Again,
and running out of time too, right? Because you've got cannabis firms that are buying up distilleries, they're buying up breweries in the United States, and so you got some of the big Canadian LPs investing in distribution so that they can widen their product base once it becomes legal in the United States. I just George, you asked about Kentucky not passing the vote. It doesn't make any sense to me. No. It just doesn't. And it doesn't feel like the will of the people is what answered the bell there, right? 91% of people in Kentucky support the legalization of marijuana, and the bill didn't pass because their representatives didn't vote for it. It wasn't a ballot initiative.
It's just a reoccurring theme. It's like the people want it, but what the people want doesn't matter. It's the managerial, academic, professional class of, buzzword we hear all the time, oligarchs. There's a small group of interested individuals that, all the way up to the highest level of government that only care about what they care about. And it doesn't matter what the taxpayer, the voter cares about. A lot of this, it's the second quarter of 2022. The fact that some of these states are still, it just defies logic, but it's just business as usual, I guess. Inside the building.
I will tell you, listen, I'm down here in Nashville, Tennessee for some meetings this week. Booze is alive and well. That is for damn sure. And
Yeah.
And so it's not to your point, it's not going anywhere, but there is an integration of cannabis that needs to happen into the vice industry. That's just going to take some time.
Well,
And
that's
you know what? Who feels
that,
bad if a whiskey baron defaults? Like, I don't feel bad. I don't think the average taxpayer does. You know, survival of the fittest. You should have been better. Be better. You know, if a couple of guys don't make it, like, so what?
100%. That's how it should be done. You know, and the other thing too is, you know, it's a good segue into what we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks. But before we get to that segue, I wanted to talk about an article Patrick sent around about Biden's budget keeping a ban on DC marijuana sales. If you've ever bought cannabis in DC, it's not really on the up and up. It feels very much like you're just going into a building and buying from a dealer. And something's off with it. But go ahead.
The guy named Chich on the third floor lounge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he did say that, you know, the same bill also, you know, keeps the state decisions under protection. But, you know, getting back to that, you know, I think that gets a good segue. You know, we've been gone. We've been lining up our guests coming on here. We got some great people coming on. We have we're going to talk about home grows, which I am uber excited about because I know nothing. So I'm very excited to hear what that gentleman has to say. And then the segue from alcohol to this is we're bringing on a young woman who works with cannabis beverages, and we're going to talk about. I think she's going to be a great voice on how will this shift away from alcohol during your next cocktail hour in California or wherever you're at, if they want to provide cannabis. So, you know, I think it's a good place for us to stop. We could sit here and preach about the political wranglings of cannabis for days, but I think I'm going to put the wrap on it, put the bow on it here, and, you know, tell everybody to stay tuned. Patrick, I'll let you close it out.
Spring break was great. I had a blast. I am really excited to be back and doing this. We missed it. And some of the text messages and some of the fiery conversation we had on the Sidebar Network were fascinating. So I can't wait to really jump back in. And like Brian said, we've spent some time lining up some guests, creating a platform. Our Women in Cannabis series will continue. We've got some great social equity stories that we're going to share with you as well. So hit that button.
Yeah, guys, great to be back. Just want to say that follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on YouTube, subscribe, hit the bell. We're on Instagram, but LinkedIn is really where you're finding. We're finding a lot of interaction and traction. So look forward to it. And as Patrick said, if you're in DC, don't buy from a guy named Chich, Mr. Green Jeans, or Mr. Newtown. Hopefully we'll get regulation soon and it'll be safe. So hope everyone stays safe, and we'll be back very soon.